Hello friends, Jermaine here and welcome to this video. In today's package of the week, we'll be looking at Ferry. Ferry provides a GraphQL client for use in Flutter and Dart projects. So whether it's Dart for server, Flutter mobile apps, and also web apps as well. So this is pretty exciting. It's got some nice features as well with support for caching, as well as a convenience widget called the operation widget that we can use in our Flutter application. Also supports offline persistence with solutions like Hive Store and caching and garbage collection and so on and so forth. If this is your first time to the channel, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you don't miss out on future tutorials demonstrating how to build full stack applications with Dart and Flutter. And without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get to the code, I just want to take you through the API we're going to be working with. So we are working with a countries API, which has support for making GraphQL queries. So this is the URL for it, and it will bring you to this interface where we've got some docs here showing the queries we can make. And also here is the schema related to this countries API. So if we look at the docs and we see the queries that are supported, we can, for instance, make a query to retrieve a list of countries, and for each country, these are the fields we can pull out. So looking at this, we can come over here and then we can make a query to countries. From the countries that get returned, the country type has got a code field. It's also got a name. There's also a native field. And let's just pull the emoji from the response as well. So if I go ahead and run this, then we get this result containing exactly the fields we pulled out. And they're returned because the fields exist on this country type. So code name, native, emoji. Okay, so going to the code base, we have over here a console-based app, and we've got a couple of dependencies that we've installed. So there is Ferry, which contains the Ferry client. There is GQ or HTTP link. This allows us to make HTTP requests to our GraphQL endpoint. There is Ferry generator, which we'll use to generate some Dart classes based on the schema of the GraphQL API we're going to be working with. And we've got build runner, which we're going to run to generate the classes for us using this generator. So firstly, we need to download our schema from our GraphQL endpoint. And to do that, I'm just going to create a new folder here in the lib directory called GraphQL. And then to download our schema, we want to hit download, and then you can go ahead and click SDL to download the schema file for us. And once you've downloaded it, just drag it into the GraphQL folder. The next step is we need to create a build.yaml file, which will contain certain instructions to instruct the builder to generate classes from this file. So if we look at the docs, we need to copy this information into a build.yaml file. So I'll go ahead and copy that. And then in the root directory, I'll create a build.yaml file. And I'll paste that in here. And what we need to do is to replace where it says your package name with the name of the package, which we called countries client. So in order to get a package name, it's this field here. And we need to point to the location of where our schema.graphql file is. It's in lib/graphql. Okay, so this should be good. And then from here, we just need to open the terminal. And then we need to run pub run build runner build. And what that does is it will go and grab our schema, the GraphQL file, and then proceed to generate a couple of classes we're going to be using. So it takes a while initially, so we'll just wait. Okay, and it looks like we're getting an issue. Hold on. If we come to the schema GraphQL file, yeah, there's this mistake here. So let's just do that. And then I'll go ahead and run this again. Okay, So that's good. From the schema GraphQL file, it's gone ahead and generated a couple of Dart files. So some of these are just classes based on our GraphQL schema, the types in there. So for instance, G country filter input is based on country filter input here, for instance. I'm not going to bore you with the details. You can go through that in your own time if you want. Now, what we need to do is create our query and generate the operation for that. So in here, I'll create another GraphQL file. I'll call it countries.graphql. And then in here, we'll create our first query. I'll call it FetchCountries. And then in here, we'll be making the same call we did earlier. So I'll just copy that and then paste that in here. And then I can save this. Let's go ahead and run the build command again and let's see what happens. Running the build command again generates a couple of files based on this query we just created. So these files contain a request class. So we'll be using this class, which is of type operation request. In the request, we're going to be making to our API. This file var.gql.dart contains the variables we can pass along with the request. We're going to use that later on. And then we've got data, which has to do with the response that is sent back and the fields we are pulling from our response. So for instance, these are some of the fields that we're pulling in from our response. Okay, I'm gonna come to countries_client, and then I'm going to import two of the packages we installed, and we are going to create a client object that we'll be using to make our HTTP call. So I'll create a method called initClient. This will take in a URL string. We'll start by creating a HTTP link object. So I'll create a variable called link, and then we'll instantiate HTTP link, which will take in our URL. Secondly, I'll create a client object, which will be our GraphQL client, and then it will take in our link. And then lastly, we just want to return the client object that was created. I'm going to go ahead and export two of the files that were auto-generated. I'll export the countries request, that file that was generated. And we're exporting this to allow us to access the classes in this file. And also saves me having to import it from the bin folder, because once this file is imported, this is also made available for us. So if I come to countries client, I just need to have this import. Okay, I'll create a variable called countries_rec, and then I'll be using the class that was auto-generated. So there is gfetch countries_rec. And then secondly, I'll instantiate the client object. So I'll invoke initClient, and then our URL is going to be this one here. And to make the request, we just run client.request, and then this will take in our countries_rec object. And then what we want to do is to listen for a response. From our response, you can access the results by doing response.data.countries. That should give us a list of countries. However, let's have a check to ensure that it's not empty. And if it's not empty, then we can just print results. So let's just do that and see what that gives us. So I'll run this file as such, and let's see what happens. All right, cool. So we're getting some results here like so. So this looks promising. We are getting something back from the API. Let's go ahead and format these results a bit more. So we can do something like results.forEach. So for each country, I'm just going to go ahead and print a multi-line string, and let's print the country's name as well as the country's code, for instance. So let's try this out. Okay, so there we go. Of course, we can also convert that to a JSON or JSON string. So if I go ahead and I run this, then that gives us the JSON string that looks like that. I'm going to come back to this file here, this GraphQL file. And then for our queries, we are able to pass in certain variables to filter our results. So I'm going to come back to this one here. I'll click on docs, and if we look at the countries example, we're able to set a filter here like so. I'm going to test that now. We need to do query, and then the name of this query, fetch countries, like so. So in here, we'll define a variable called filter, and the type, which is of country filter input. So we're doing this here. And then for countries, we'll define the filter variable, and then we'll do $filter, which is the result of this in here. So doing this now allows us to specify some filter variables to affect the result. And to do that in here, I'll click on query variables at the bottom left, and then we'll create our query variable. Let's see what this query variable looks like. So country filter input contains these fields, and each of these fields allows us to specify these other fields, other variables. So let's test that out. I'll create filter. Let's set the code as in the country code, and then we want to set it equal to, let's just say ES. So if I go ahead and run this, okay, it gives us an empty result. I think it's meant to be capitals. Okay, there we go. So setting that variable gives us this result, for instance, for Spain. So I'm gonna copy this, and then I'll paste that here, and then I'll run pub run build runner build to regenerate this. And because we're specifying query variables now, I'll come back to countries client.dart, and then I'll also export countries.var.gql.dart because it contains information about the query variables that we're using. So let me come back here, and in order to set our filter, this class contains a builder function, and this function gives us what's known as a request builder. So on this request builder, we'll be able to specify our query variables. So like so, and then we'll set some vars, we'll set our filter, and then we'll set the code, and we'll set EQ to ES. If I go ahead and run this file again, then we get Spain as a response. Of course, we can set a couple more variables on this. So if you want to set another one, notice we're using the cascade operator in order to set our first query variable. So if you want to set another one, you just need to use the cascade operators again. So we'll do vars filter dot, let's say, currency dot EQ, and we'll set euros. Okay, then in fact, let's set GB for the filter code. Hopefully we can get a couple more results. Okay, we got no results. However, if I do regex and I pass in a regular expression like that, that'll probably give us a couple more results. Okay, there we go. So we got Estonia, and then we got Spain, etc. So all of these comes from the docs for our country filter input. So I just did this one. All right, so good news is we've got our client working. We've been able to define our schemas and then done some code generation for it. Also with these schemas as well, you're able to import other schemas in this one. So for instance, if we needed to import countries as part of schema .GraphQL, then we'll do something like that. We'll add a comment and then we'll have an import statement. And then in here, we'll do countries.GraphQL. So you can do something like this as well if you've got schema files that depend on types from other schema files. But in this example, we don't need it, so I'll just get rid of that. It's worth mentioning that this solution works cross-platform, so we can use Ferry on the server. We can also use it on the web as well as in a Flutter app. And that being said, I'm gonna demonstrate an example using this in a Flutter application. So let me close that. And before I do that, I'm gonna add in another field to retrieve the capital from our country's response. And then let me regenerate the classes we need. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create the Flutter app. I'll cd back to the previous folder, and then I'll do Flutter create countries app. And then let me go ahead and open countries app in the new window. All right, I've got that open here. In our Flutter app, I've gone ahead and added the same dependencies in our countries client project. So we've got Ferry, and we've got GQL HTTP link. And then for dev dependencies, we've got the Ferry generator and the build runner packages here. And then I've imported our countries client project. I've specified a relative path to the folder is at this location. And also I've gone ahead and added the Ferry Flutter package. So this package contains an operation widget, which is a convenience widget for making calls to our GraphQL API. I'm going to come to our main.dart file, and I've gone ahead and simplified the boilerplate example. So we just have a single stateless widget, which renders a material app, and then the home widget is the scaffold example. So if I go ahead and run this, that gives us that. And then I'll import the Ferry Flutter package, and I'm importing the countries client library from our countries client project that we created earlier. And then in here, we'll instantiate our client by doing init client. Then secondly, we'll instantiate our countries request object. So FetchCountries rec. Lastly, we can go ahead and within our body, get rid of this center widget and then have the operation widget. We'll specify our client, and we also specify an operation request, which is our countries rec variable. And then we'll specify a builder for that. So the builder gives us the build context as well as the response. So first we're going to check if our response is loading. That means the request is ongoing. Then we'll just return the center widget where the child is a circular progress indicator, or else we can retrieve the response by doing response.data dot, and then just notice we're not getting typing. And in order to set the correct type information, because right now is dynamic for the response, I'm gonna go ahead and return to our countries client, and then I'll make sure that I also export countries.data.gql.dart, so this file. And then I'll return back here. We need to import the Ferry library, which means that in here we can do operation response. And then we'll do FetchCountries data, and then FetchCountries vars. So from there, we should now be able to get some type information. So countries, response data.countries. And then from there, we'll just return a list view dot builder. We'll specify an item count, which is the length of countries. And then we'll have an item builder, which is a function containing the build context and the current index. From here, we'll return a list style widget. And this list style has a leading, which will be a text widget containing the countries. Then we'll get it by index. And then we want the emoji. And then for the title, we'll have the country name. And then for the subtitle, we'll have the country's capital. So let's go ahead, then save this, which gives us that. And we have a non-null string must be provided. Okay, so it looks like one of these values is returning null. We do this. If for some reason the capital is null, then we'll just render this string. Okay, cool. So it looks like that, and of course we just see a triple dash because it's null for the capital. But we see that we are getting a response. Our Ferry client appears to be working pretty well. Let me just shift the flag a bit forward so I can add some spaces. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, so we got our GraphQL client working with our Flutter app. And also we can check this on the web as well. So if I go ahead and stop this, and then I choose Chrome Web and I launch this app again, I should go ahead and also display on Chrome, and we see that it shows perfectly. And I didn't have to make any changes to this code base. We've been able to get it working on the web as well as the mobile by using this convenience operation widget. You can also use a stream builder, which will give you the same effect, but no point using that if you've got this operation widget. Alright, so I'm going to end the video here. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button and share this video. If you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon next to the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future updates. If you've got any questions about what's been presented here, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.